Hello everyone. This is your instructor. The language. So the course is intended for absolute beginners or uh, those who are not familiar with Python. So the course will help you to be familiar with the programming language. Okay. So before we start, we'll have to make sure that you installed Python correctly. Okay. So to make sure that you already installed Python correctly, we'll check the Python interpreter first before we start our course. So if you can, if you can find the Python interpreter in your search, this is okay. The second thing, you have to check here. So if you can write Python and you get this output, this means that your Python is already installed. So make sure that you have Python uh, 3 and above. Okay. This is for the installation process. Okay. Now we will start with the most basic thing is the definition. What's programming? Okay. So programming, we can say that it's a way to instruct computer to perform various tasks. Okay. What do we mean by instruct the computer? Instruct the computer just basically means that you provide the computer with a set of instructions that are written in language. So the language can be Python, can be C, C++, and so on. Okay, so instruction. What kind of instruction? Okay, the instruction can be a normal mathematical operations or can be showing some data in your screen and so on. This is the definition of programming. After that, we'll have to discuss the steps to learn programming. So if you are an absolute beginner to programming, also these some steps I would like to share with you first before we start with the main course. Okay. So the steps to programming we can start first. If you want to learn programming, you have to start with the basics. What do I mean when we say we start with the basics? You have to learn the logic of programming, so, or we can say programmatical thinking. So because now you are dealing with a computer, so computer does not process instructions or data the way we process as human. So the way to learn programming is to learn the logic of programming first before you learn the language. So you, for example, if you learn a programming language but you don't understand the logic of the uh, programming, you will suffer during the whole process of learning. So learning the logic first of programming will make it easier for you to learn any programming language, Python or any other programming language. The other thing regarding the basics is to understand the syntax. When we say the syntax, we mean the grammar of the language. So in natural language, English or whatever language, okay, we have grammar, subject, verb, and so on. Also for programming languages, Python has a syntax, C++ has syntax, JavaScript has syntax, and so on. So if you want to learn programming, you have to understand syntax. So uh, while you yeah, understand, while you program or you learn to program, you will first understand syntax and you will learn the syntax, and step by step you will be familiar with the programming language. Okay. Yep. The second thing is that, or the third thing, sorry, is one thing that I would like, I would like you to, what you can say, memorize or put it in front of you when you program. Okay. I think some people are saying that the voice not loud enough. Let me check. is the voice okay? I think the voice is okay. Um, Guys, is the voice okay or not? Actually, I'm using my headphone.
Uh, Excuse me, sir.
Yeah.
Can you raise your?
Is it okay now? Can you hear me now or not? Let me check. Guys, can you hear me now? Okay. Okay. Let me see. Check. Okay. Okay.
Much better now.
I think now is okay. Yeah.
Much better.
Okay. Let's continue, or should we start? Okay. Let's just start with the steps. Okay. So as I was saying that if you want to learn programming first, you have to start with the basics. Okay, the first step is to learn the logic first, understand how how computers or electronic devices deal with instructions that we provide to them. Okay, so you have to use a programmatical thinking. Okay, the other one is understand syntax. What do we mean by syntax? The grammar, if we are talking about natural languages. So if you go back to programming languages, now we are talking about syntax. So Python has its syntax, C++ has its syntax, and so on. Okay. The third one is, I think, the most important one. So because actually some beginners or even sometimes people who already learned about programming languages, they that there's something I can say is that programming is not magic. Okay, so you cannot just do something and expect your computer to do the other thing. So your computer or your device will do the things that you provide it with. So if you give your computer a certain instruction, it will execute a certain instruction. It will not do anything. It will not do anything else except the instruction you provided. Okay. So, but keep this in mind. Programming is not magic. So, if you didn't tell computer to do a thing, it will not do it. Okay. So, if you you want to start certain instructions, but you didn't tell the computer, it will not start. If you call the variable or a function that's not there, it will not be used, and so on. Okay. The fourth one is regarding the basics is understand your device first. Okay. What do I mean by understand your device first? So understand the device you are dealing with. It's either a computer or what we can Raspberry Pi, or Arduino, and so on. After all, you are dealing with an electronic device. So first, before you start programming your device, you have to understand it. So if you come to Python and using Python in a computer, so we will go both ways. We have, for example, Windows, and we have, for example, Mac, or we also have Linux. Okay. So if you are, for example, using Windows, you have to understand, the command line, the directories, and how to use them, how to deal with them. Okay.
So, and you have to understand how Python or the programming language you are using deal with this with your device. Okay, this is the fourth one. Okay, the second point is when you are learning. Okay, you have to put this in mind, which is that you have to practice what you learn. Okay, don't expect that if you keep learning or taking courses. For example, now you will take this course. After that, you go take another course regarding Python, and you will keep taking courses regarding Python, but you don't practice what you learn. You will you will be in or you will stay at the same spot you have been going around. Okay, maybe you will understand some theory about the language. You will understand some basics, but if you didn't practice, you will forget the basics and you will not improve. Okay, so whenever you want to learn any programming language, you have to practice what you learn. Okay, try different ideas. You already know, you already, for example, know the basics. Try different ideas. Try to do it using other way, and so on. Okay. The third point is start small. What do I mean by start small? Okay, when you learn a programming language, okay, now you already know how to use the language. Now you are planning to start your project, whatever the project, how big it is, and so on. First, start by small steps. So start from the basic principle of programming. For example, let's say now you have a big system. You have log in, log out. You have users. You have processors, machine learning, AI, and so on. So what you have to do first is start from the basics. Start to divide your code into basic blocks, functions, and so on. So make sure that every part is working by its own. So if every part is working by its own, then you can combine them. Because I noticed that some programmers or even researchers and so on, when they are doing they are writing a program for the research or writing a program for as an assignment or a project or so on, they just start with the whole thing, start writing everything and they start putting everything in their code. After that, when they run program, oh, it's not working, oh, there is a problem, and they keep debugging their code and trying to get what's wrong. And now it's a mess. It's not you cannot read it anymore, or you can understand where is the error coming from. So this is important. So if you have a big project, imagine that you have 1,000 lines of code or 2,000 lines of code. So if you just put everything there and start your writing your program, and after you reach 500 lines of code, oh, now is it working or not? Let's try. You run the code. Oh, it's not working. What's wrong? Then you keep looking for what's wrong. No, start small. Write the first function. What do you want to do? For example, get the user data. Okay, get the user data. Is it running? Okay. Now the other thing, process the data. Okay, you process the data, verify the data, and so on. When you divide your program, or you divide your code, it will be easier for you to learn, and it will be easier for you to write a good, stable program. Okay. The fourth point. Okay. The fourth point is as a beginner. So if you are an absolute beginner in the language, any language, even if you, for example, if you already have some basics in other languages, and you started learning a new language, start with writing your own code. Stop copy and paste. Okay, copy and paste is okay, because the code is already there on the internet. You can just copy the code and put it in your project. But there is a problem. If you are an absolute beginner, it will be difficult for you to learn, because for a starter, you don't know the syntax. So you will keep going back and forth to the internet, looking for what's right, what's wrong. But as a beginner, this is not okay. As a beginner, forget about copy and paste. Write your own code, because after all, you will start the small code, and after that, you will grow with time. Okay. So what the fourth point is forget about copy and paste as a beginner. After that, when you are familiar with the language and you already know the syntax of the language, how to deal with it, okay, you can, just copy the code if it's already there. So if the code is already there, you don't have to rewrite it. You don't have to think that much about it. Just if you find the code, understand the code and use it. That's all. Okay. The fifth point is, and this is very important, you should start reading. What do I mean when I say you should start reading? Okay. Now you write a code. You start the code. Oh, there is an error. Some people, there is an error. They will go try something else. They will keep doing what we call try and error. Okay. You will keep doing, you will keep trying, changing this and that and so on, but without understanding the error, this is also a very big problem, and it will consume a lot of time of you, and sometimes it will stop you from learning. If you are a beginner, okay, you will say, why should I learn this? This is difficult. Programming is difficult. No, I can say that an error message, or we can, sorry. An error message is there for a reason. So the people who design Python or build Python or build the programming language, they provide you with an error message. The error message is there for a reason. The reason for error message to understand, the problem you have. You have a problem there, so you have to understand the problem. Why is it there? Okay, how to solve it. So now when you read the error message, you will understand what is the problem in code. But if you ignore the error message, you will keep doing what we say try and error, and you will stick, or you will be stuck in that hole for a very long time without knowing what you are doing. This is another problem. The other thing, aside from the error, when you learn about a programming language, also you should start reading about documentations. Okay, programming languages is, it's very big. So it has also what you can say. Each application has its own libraries, has its own documentations. So, for example, if now we are starting with the basics of Python programming, but some of you will go with the web development for using Python. Some will go with machine learning or deep learning. Some would go with using Python and MATLAB and so on. And each one of these applications has its own libraries. So you cannot learn this stuff from one source. So you have to keep reading. So if you are using a library, you have to understand about the library, read about it, read the documentation, understand the documentation, then start using it. Okay, this is the fifth point. Okay. The sixth point is, now we have, I can say we have coders and we have programmers. Okay, so a coder is someone who get a code or a program or an algorithm and write it in another language. So you have already the code in C++, you have it in C and so on. Then you just take it and write it in Python. Okay, or the code is already there on the internet. You just copy the code and paste it there. Okay, your program is running. Yay. But no, you're not a programmer. You are just a coder, because you don't know what you just did there. You just keep copy and pasting. You just keep taking the code from a place and put it in another place. This is a coder job. But a programmer, you have to understand what you are doing. Okay. The last point is, I can say that try and error is a good way for making things work. Okay, so you are, you have a problem, you are trying to solve it. You have read about, the language, you understand the language, you have read about the library. You understand the library, but it's not working somehow. So you also search in the internet. You didn't find any solution. You try an error, till you find something. But if you keep trying and error without, going to the documentation, searching about the problem, trying to, sorry, trying to, just make your program work without knowing what you are doing, it will be a waste of time. You will waste a lot of time. Just try and error. Okay. These are the points I wanted to mention as before we start with the main course or our course for Python. Okay. So our course will be divided into parts. Okay. Our course will be will be divided into 5 sessions. Each session is 2 hours. Okay. So in each session, we will discuss about the basics of the we'll discuss about the basics of the language. We'll learn about data types and so on in Python. And after we finish the sessions or the intended course, parts of the course, we'll go to the last thing, what we or a challenge. Okay, this is an easy challenge, but if you want to solve it, you will need to have the basic understanding of Python. Okay, what's this challenge about? I'll give you a book, or you can choose a book in a text file, and you will write a code that is going to generate this photo, for example. So this photo is generated using a Python code, which from a book. So each word has the size according to how many times it has been repeated in the book, and so on. Okay, this one we called word cloud challenge. It's from Google, I think. So we'll be using this challenge to verify our understanding at the end of the course. Okay, this is for the intro. Okay. Now we'll go to the Python language. Okay. So what is Python? Python is according to the definition in Wikipedia and so on, and the definition by the, what we can say, the community, Python is an interpreted language, okay, with high, or we can say a high-level language, general-purpose programming language, created by our friend Joydo Van Rossum, and it was released in 1991. The philosophy behind Python is the emphasis on code readability. Okay, what do you mean by code readability? We'll discuss this later. And notably, using significant white spaces, we'll also notice that the use of white spaces or indentation. Also, we'll discuss that later in the course. And it provides a constructs that enable clear programming in both small and large scales. Okay, this is one of the main advantages of Python. So the good thing about Python is that it's easy to read and it's very clear. So if I give you a Python code, even if you're not that familiar with the programming, you can read some of the coding. Okay. Okay. Now let's discuss the Python applications, or what when we say before that, we say is Python is a multi or a general purpose programming language. What do you mean by that? Okay, so Python have been used in many applications, and it can be or can we say it can be used in many applications. One of the main applications that Python has been or being used nowadays is data analysis, or we can data science or big data and whatsoever. And we have also AI or artificial intelligence, machine learning, and so on. We have also automation. Here, automation, what do we mean by automation? Well, also, it can be used for automation regarding robots and so on. And the other kind of automation is automating your scripts. Okay, so when we say automation or automating your script, we mean that you have some task you want to do on your computer or on your server, or whatever, you use Python to do the automation because it's easier to do it in Python other than other languages, because it will save you time and small pieces of code that will do your task. The fourth application or purpose of Python is web apps. Okay, so Python has what we call frameworks such as Django framework and Flex framework and other frameworks. These frameworks are used by many companies like Instagram, I think also Spotify and so on, to develop their own what you call softwares or programs. So Django, which is written, or sorry, which use Python as scripting language to create web applications and so on. The fourth application is mobile apps. Okay, it's not that familiar, but there are some frameworks that can be uses Python language to create mobile apps. Desktop apps, this is mostly you can some or most of the apps that is used in, I think, Linux and other languages, Kali and so on. They use Python to write the program because it's easier and to write the program and faster to write the program. Okay, and the other are the the seventh application is testing. What do you mean by testing? Now, you already you wrote your code in a certain programming language, okay? But you want to test your code. You want to know is it working well and so on. But there are two kinds of testing. We have the manual testing. You test your program or software or whatever manually. Or the other kind of thing is automated testing. So you write a code that tests your code. Okay. This is what we call testing. So we use Python also for testing because it's easier to write a test code using Python. The last point here is hacking. Python used widely in hacking. Why? Because in hacking you don't care much about memory management. You don't care much about data types and so on. In hacking, you care about more. You focus more on the idea you are trying to put there. You are trying to test a system. You are trying to hack a system, or you are trying to hack a device and so on. So Python is used also for hacking. Okay. Now, if we want to start writing a Python code or any programming languages, we have to also understand a small difference between editors and IDE, or integrated development environment. Okay, so what is an editor and what is an IDE? An editor is any text editor. You have the Notepad, what we can say. You have the Notepad, we have Word, and so on. These ones we call editors and so on, because they can't do anything regarding the programming language. You just write on them and save your text. On the other hand, we have IDEs, or integrated development environment. So what's an IDE? An IDE is an environment or a place where you do your work, or you do your program, or you write your software and so on. So it's an environment which we call it integrated development environment. Okay, so it's an environment. So why we use IDE? Why don't we just go and use, for example, Notepad? You can use Notepad to write your own code. Why? Okay, the reason is that IDE provides us with what we call auto completion. So when you write your code, okay, after sometimes, if you have a very big project and you are writing your code, there are some repeated words. For example, print, for loop, and so on. These are repeated. So if you the auto completion will do the thing for you. So just write, for example, FOR, and it will complete the rest of the code. Okay. You write, for example, the name of the variable, it will complete the rest of the variable. And you will see that later when we are using the VS code, okay, or Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio Code Some call it an editor, some call it an integrated development environment. But mostly at the beginning, if you start with the Visual Studio Code or use Atom or other editors and so on, they have what we call extensions that will develop them to be IDEs. Okay, so you can add and debugging tools to it. You can add testing tools and so on. Oh, okay. The other point about IDEs or the benefit of or IDEs is debugging. Okay. Now IDEs help us to, with tracking the the bugs or the errors in our code. Okay, because if you have a normal editor, it will not because it doesn't understand the language you are writing, so it will not help you with this. But the IDE has tools that will help you with finding the errors or the bugs in your code. Okay. The last point is testing. The good thing about it is that you can also test a snippet of your code. You have a very big, very large code or a very large project, and you want to test snippets or part of your code. You just go to that part and test it one by one. We will see this later. Okay. Now, we mentioned before that Python is an interpreted language. Okay, but we hear something called compiled languages, or we hear something called the compiler. Okay, so what's the difference between them? Why do we have an interpreter and a compiler? And why Python is an interpreted language? Why it's not a compiled language, and so on. So let's first show you what an interpreter do. Okay, imagine that you have a certain instructions. You write, for example, a mathematical operation. Let's say you have, for example, this operation x plus 1 equals something. Okay, x plus 1 equals something, and so on. Okay, this is, for example, this is an instruction, and this is another instruction, x minus 1, and this is another instruction, and so on. So these all you can see, we have many instructions here. Okay. So let's say we have this instruction, first instruction, second instruction, and third instruction. Okay, the instruction can, the instructions can be mathematical operations, can be printing some text out, and so on. So what an interpreter do? We have the instructions, for example, this is instruction A, instruction B, and instruction C, and many lines of instructions. Okay, so the interpreter will get the first instruction, interpret the instruction to a machine code that the machine understands, and give you an output. It will get the second instruction converted to a machine code and give you an output, and so on. However, compiler, no. The compiler, what the compiler does, it will first get the first instruction, second instruction, third instruction, send it to the compiler, compile the code, and convert it to machine code, and give you an output. So if you notice that, we can say that the interpreter execute our code line by line. Okay, so it will give us the output line by line. However, the compiler, it will get the whole code, compile it and to the machine code, and give us an output. If we see the difference here, we can see that we can conclude from this is that a compiler is faster, or a combined language is faster than an interpreted language. Why? Because now, if you, for example, if we have an interpreter, a human interpreter that translate your your words, or your talking to another language, word by word or sentence by sentence. So you have to wait for the interpreter to give you the next instruction, and so you will have, after he gives you the first instruction, you have to wait and wait for the other instruction, and so on. This is when we talk for an interpreter. Okay. However, if you, for example, if you have a translator that gets a message, you give a message or a letter, translate the whole letter to the other language and give it to the intended user or the intended receiver. So which one will be faster? Of course, the translator, because to translate the whole thing, give it to the user will get the message, and that's all. It doesn't have to wait for the instruction one by one. Okay. However, if the combined language is faster, why do we use interpreted languages? Why do we use languages like Python? Because now we have, for example, C++, we have C. We already have C++. Why don't we just stick with C++? Why do we have Python here? Even though if you go search about it, you can find that C++ is faster than Python. We also have other languages like JavaScript. We have also Java and so on. Why? The reason is that even though combined languages is faster, interpreted languages is good when you deal with operations that needs, to keep working even if there is a certain error in one of the lines. Okay, so if you have a server, for example, like let's say Facebook server, it's a it has server all over the world. Imagine that the server is written by a combined language, okay, like C++. Okay, the server is running and so on, but suddenly the programmer made an error or has a bug there, and the program stops. Okay, so now the program stops because the whole program will stop, the server will be down, the whole world will not be able to use Facebook. Okay, however, if you use interpreted language, you have already the first and second instruction and so on. These one are already running. So if there is an instruction that's not running, the programmer can write a code to, skip this error. If there is an error, can skip and keep running. Okay, and your code or your program will not stop. However, in the combined language like C++, if there is a big error, it will stop working. Okay. Someone says that so our interpreter is absolute. Okay, interpreter is good and is bad also. But for example, if we are talking about speed, interpreter is not faster than a compiler. Compiler is faster. So it depends on your application. So if you know that you already have, or you already have the idea and you already have a solid programming skills, you write your code using a combined language. Okay, so now you have a faster program. The program will run faster. However, if you don't want to to risk stopping the whole system because of a small error, okay, you will go for interpreted language, but you don't care that much about speed. Okay, that's for the compiler and interpreter. Okay, so the one that we see here, or the Python software program that you already download, is a Python interpreter. Let's see this. So if we run Python now, this is the Python interpreter, this one. Okay, you can see that I can write instructions line by line. Okay, these are my instructions. Okay, so you can see that I can write my instructions line by line, and it will run the first instruction, the second instruction, and so on. It will not wait for you to write the whole program. This is what we call an interpreted language. But if you go to C++, you cannot do this. You have to write the whole program and compile it, then you can use it. Okay, this is what we call interpreted language. Okay, now let's discuss or try to understand how Python let's try to understand how Python deals with or how any programming language interact with the RAM. Okay, this one is one of the basics of programming languages interacting with the RAM and so on. I will just cover the general idea. So When you write, for example, x equals 10, okay, what happens now? This is what happens. When you write this, you define x equals 10. The Python code goes to the RAM. We already know that the RAM is divided into blocks of code, okay, and we have addresses. So let's imagine that for easier understanding, this is the address. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. This is the address of our block of a block of RAM. Okay, so we have the RAM, we have a part of the RAM. This is the address of it. So when you say x equals 10, this is what happens. The Python will assign a variable which is x, and it will point to that address. So now x is pointing to the address 1. So what will happen when you say x equals to 10? It will get the 10, put it in this block, and it will keep pointing to it. And when you do, for example, y equals to 12. So now let's say y equals to 12. What happens? Also the same. 12 point to, for example, to this address, assign the number to it, or the data to it, 12. Okay. Now we have x pointing to the address that has 10, and y pointing to the address that has 12, and the address is, for example, 1 and 3. So if I try, for example, the simple instructions called print, which is also like C out in C++ and so on, to print our result, and also print for y, what will happen? Your Python code will go to that address, okay? Because you say print x, it will go to x pointing to that address. It will go to the address, get the number that's already there. For example, now we have 10 here, and it will get the number. So for example, let's say print x, it will give you 10. And if we say print y, it will give you 12, and so on. So if you try and change, for example, you say x equals to 2, okay, print x, it's already changed. Why? This the Python code has already went to the address, okay, and get rid of the 10 and put the 2 instead of it. Okay, this is what happens when you assign variables or other data types to sorry, when you assign a data type like list, integer, and so on to a variable. Okay, let's see some. Now we will be discussing, sorry, data types. Okay, what do we mean by data types? Data types is the way we deal or we interact with data using Python or programming language. Okay, so in Python, the main data types we have is we have lists, we have tables, we have dictionaries, we have booleans. So for example, booleans and the numbers, strings. These are, I think, common data types between all the languages. So we have boolean in C++, we have boolean in C, and so on. Numbers, we have numbers like integers, complex number, floats in C++, and so on. Strings also. But when we come to Python, we have something called tables, we have lists, dictionaries, and sets. This one's one of the features or the data types that identifies Python. Okay. So now let's try and understand these data types. Okay. When I say sorry. So when we say, for example, let's start with the simplest one is numbers. Okay. So the data type number has other what you call it, branches, which we have complex numbers, integers, and floats. Let's just start by the simplest one, which is an integer. So what do we mean by integer? This one, 10, minus 10, 12, 1 million, and so on. These integers. Okay. So for example, if Python can also tell you that. So we have a function in Python that tells us what type of data we are dealing with. So you can see that this one is an integer. Okay. Now let's try and write, for example, x equals 10.0. Okay. This one is what? Float. The other data type, because we have 0.0 here. Okay. Let's say 0.5 also. This is a float. Okay. So another, I think in C++ and C we have double, we have float, we have a short double, short float, long float, and so on. But in Python we just have float. Okay, so for sorry, for this kind of numbers. So we have, if we also write this, also this one is considered as a float. Okay. Now we have complex numbers. Complex numbers, as we know, sorry. Okay. So if you write type, this one is a complex number. And later we'll discuss what kind of operations we can do with these kind of data. Okay. Now we have discovered the data types regarding numbers. Let's go for the other data type, which is booleans. Okay. What do we mean by boolean? Just true and false. This is the boolean data type. So we have, for example, x equals true. Sorry, x equals true. So if you try type here, what type of data we have? Bool, which is a boolean. Okay. This is for booleans. We have also false. Okay. Now we already know about numbers. We already know about booleans. Let's go to the third type, which is strings. Okay. What do you mean by string? When we say, let's clear this one. When we say strings, we mean this one. For example, let's say Alex. Try type. This is a string. If we write this and try, this is also a string. Okay, str, string. In Python, a string is any character or number that's between two quotation mark, single or double. So we also can write this. This is also a string. So double quotation mark or single quotation mark will define a string in Python. Okay. So if we try, for example, this one, if we try 10, 10 is a number. Okay. But if we write it between two quotation marks, it will be a string, not a number anymore. Okay. Because now we'll deal with it as a string. So it's a symbol called 10. Okay, not a number called 10, but a symbol that represents the 10 and so on as a string. Okay. There are many operations we can do with the strings. We can combine them. We can slice. We can do whatever. Later we'll discuss what kind of operation we can do with string. The other type of data or the other data type we have, sorry, lists. Okay, lists is similar to arrays in the other languages like C++, JavaScript, and so on. How do we write a list, or what is a list? A list is a data type that combines many other data types. So we have, for example, in a list we can have many integers, or we can have many strings, and so on. How do we define a list? This way. For example, 1, 2, 3, and so on. We have square brackets, and we have elements in them, and they are separated by commas. Okay, so if we try write type here, this is the list. Okay, now some of you, if you already know about arrays in C++, what's the difference between a list and an array? Why Python has list? Why it's not called arrays? Okay, the difference between the list and arrays, the arrays of C++. Now, because in Python we are using lists, we're not using arrays. The difference is that in a list, I can have a different data type easily. I don't have to do any kind of operation to have another data type. So I can have a, okay. So this is also a list. I can have numbers. I can have symbols like this, and so on. Okay, this is a list. This is how we define a list in Python. And we can access the list easily by its index. This later we'll discuss how do we deal with lists and how we do operations to them. Okay. Now we already we are already done with the strings, numbers, booleans, and lists. Okay. Now we'll go to the other data type, which is tuples. Okay. A tuple is similar to a list, but with a small difference. Okay. So let's say x equals to 1, 2, 4. Okay. Type. So this is a tuple. Okay. So can we do also like we do in the list, like this, for example? Let's say, yeah, we can do this. Okay. Now let's say now we have a tuple, we have a list. What's the difference? Why would we have double and lists? Okay, if we is the only difference is that instead of the square brackets we have only parentheses, because now if you want to define a tuple we are using the parentheses, but if you want to define a list we are using square brackets. So is this the only difference? We have two different data types that totally different just because of square brackets and parentheses? No. So the difference is the difference between tuples and lists, or the main difference is that tuples is immutable data type. What do you mean by immutable data type? It means that we cannot change or we cannot modify the tuple. Okay, so if you already have the tuple, you cannot modify it by like inserting, deleting, and so on. However, in list we can insert. For example, let's define a new list. Let's call this one new list or whatever, and add some data to it. Okay, now I already defined the list. If I called my list here new list, this is the data I have. In a list I can do this. I can do, for example, I can insert. Okay, so I can insert a new number here. Okay, so if I go check the list, I already have a number here. I inserted 1, and I can insert anything. Okay, for example, let's insert this one. Okay, I can delete and just say pop, for example. Okay, is one of the operations, and there is a lot of operations we'll discuss later. Okay, however, if we go to tuple, let's define a new tuple, for example. Okay, let's use a tuple 1, 2, 3. Okay, let's say, okay, this is our tuple. Let's try the same way. Can we add to it? Use the same function, insert, for example, 1, for example, insert a or whatever. We get an error. What does it say? Tuple object has no attribute insert. Means that we cannot edit a tuple. Okay, we cannot modify a tuple. However, we can modify a list. Because now if you want to change a tuple, you have to define a new or assign a new tuple. You have to do it this way. This one I want to add 5, I have to change to assign it again. So this one, it will remove the old one and create a new one. So it will remove the old tuple object or to and create a new one. Okay. However, in the list, I can, using the same list, I can add to it, delete from it, and so on. This is the difference between a list and a tuple. Okay. Now we discussed tuples, we discussed lists, the difference between them. Now we'll go to the main or the one of the advantages of Python that gives Python a powerful tool. One of the powerful tools of Python is the data type dictionaries. Okay, what do you mean by dictionary? Dictionary is from the name. It's dictionary. We have a key, or we have a word, and we have the definition. That's a dictionary, or the normal dictionary we are using. Okay, so I have a word. What's the meaning of the word? I go look for the word and I get its definition. In Python, it's similar to this. So what do I mean by that? In Python, we have a dictionary, we have a key, and we can get the value from a dictionary using that key. How can we do it? For example, let's define a new dictionary. Let's say, let's call this dict or whatever, new dictionary. How do you find a dictionary? We have brackets. We define a dictionary between two brackets. Okay. So let's say 1, 2, 3. Sorry. To define the key, first we have to define a key. For example, let's say the key is A here, and we have a value 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. Okay, another key, this one, and so on. Okay, then we close. So if we type, okay, new dict, it's what? A dictionary, dictionary. Okay, so how can we use a dictionary? Okay, well, now I defined the dictionary, I defined its key. The good thing is I can access this value using the key. So I can access like this. Okay. So for example, a good example of using the dictionary, like say Alex, I have Alex, okay, the name, and I have his number, for example, 006, blah, 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 0, and so on. Okay. And we have, for example, Sam. Let's say he has number 006, blah, 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 and so on. Okay. Sorry, I made a mistake here. Yeah. Okay. So for example, now I can get Alex number like this because it's a string, so I have to put it between two quotation. Okay, so I got the value or the number, for example, of Alex. I can also get Sam the same way. So I get the value of Sam. I can assign a new one. For example, I can say Ali, and I assign a new value. Okay, so if I go now check for Ali, I have this. If I check the whole dictionary, I have now a new value with a key. So this one we call the key, and this one we call a value. So you can use the key to access the value. Okay, you can use a key to assign a new value and so on. Okay, this is a dictionary in Python, and it has so many operations. We'll discuss later. The last one is we have what we call a set. Okay, how do we define a set? To define a set, we just write, let's say, new set here. Oh, you can see that a set is similar to a list and tuples, but it uses brackets like dictionary. Let's check this one. Set. It's a set. Okay, so what's the difference? What's the difference between a set and a list or a tuple and so on? Okay, the difference between lists, tuples, and sets, the main difference is that sets is not ordered. It doesn't have an index. Okay, because now in a list, if I have a list like this, for example, I can access the first item using, for example, this using its index. So the first item here has an index which 0. In programming languages, the index of each item Okay, will give us the item. This is for a list, for example, and it should start with 0. So this is I can access the item using its index. However, if I check for a list, okay, the list first is not ordered. So in a list, the order will not it will not change. So this one will keep its place as a first, second, and so on. However, in the list, I cannot access using index. Set object has no subscriptable and so on. What does it mean? Yeah, is that we cannot access using an index, okay? And the other thing is not ordered, so it can the order can change anytime, okay? This is what we call a set, and difference between a set and a list and so on. So for tables, lists, and strings, they all start with index 0, like any other programming languages. They start with index 0. However, sets, they cannot use an index, so we cannot say they start with index 0 because they had no index. Dictionaries, because they use key values, so we cannot access them directly by using an index. It will cause an error and so on. Numbers, they just one number and so on. Booleans, also true and false. Okay, that's all. I'm sorry. For the basics of data types. Now, we already know about the data types and how to use them. Okay. Now we'll start doing some basic operations, or let's do some coding here. Okay. Okay. For now, I think you already know how to use. I already showed you how to use this one, so you can just start a Python program. Go here, write Python. This is a way, or you can use the command line. If you install the Python according to the tutorial I give you correctly, you should also access the Python from the command line easily, like this. Okay. This is regarding the what we call the Python interpreter, or using Python and the code line. Now we'll start using the Python with the Visual Studio Code, okay, or your editor or IDE. For me, I will be using the Visual Studio Code. So when you start programming for Python, JavaScript, or whatever programming language you will be using, we have to make sure that we already understand what we call in what we call in Windows, Linux, Macs, and so on, directories. What do we mean by directory? So now, if we let's go to we'll discuss some basics about using directory. So when I say directory, this is what I mean by a directory. Okay, what does it mean? So now in a computer we have hard disk. A hard disk has drives. Okay. So for example, this one C is our first disk. Okay, or our partition of a disk which has the users or has our system. So what does it mean? See, it's one of the basics of using computer. So if you go here, okay, just like this. See, for example, if you go to users, so this is the directory. This is a directory. Okay. Okay. Now if I can see that Hatem. So now you have to understand how to access a directory using the command line, because if you cannot use the command line, it will be difficult for you to deal with the Python. Because okay, you can use Python directly, using the IDE and so on, but this is okay. But if for bigger projects, it will be difficult for you to just use the IDE directly or use the interpreter only. Okay. So let's learn some basics of using the command line. So when you have a command line, you can, at the beginning, when you start the command line or CMD for Windows, it will directly start at the folder of the user, okay? Which is, for example, here, users Hatem, so it's here. To check the folder or what side inside the folder, in Windows 10, you can use ls like this, and you can see all the data you have inside the folder. Okay, so that you can navigate through the folder and so on. Okay, if you are using what do you call it? If you are using Windows 7 or older versions, you can use dir. Okay, it will also give you the folders and data inside your folder or inside that directory you are in. So when I say a directory, so C users Hatem, this is the directory I'm in, means that you are here. Okay, if you want to change the directory using the command line, you can use that cd, which is change directory. Okay, someone is asking for a Mac. Okay, the Mac, the operations almost similar, okay, in the terminal also, but I cannot explain here the Mac because I'm using Windows, but you can also check on the internet. You will understand more about using the terminal in a Mac, but the operation is almost the same. Okay, so if I want to change a directory, I can just use cd, okay, which is mean change directory. Now, if you want to change the directory, you can change the directory by providing the whole path, okay, for the directory. So this is the whole path, okay? However, if you are already inside the directory, for example, now I'm already inside this directory. If I want to access any folder here, for example, I want to access the desktop, okay? Using the mouse, I can just go here, look for the desktop. I'm already in the desktop. But okay, this is easy. But if you are using the command line or to access Python and so on, to access your Python code and so on, it will be difficult to just use the mouse. And so I have to understand to use the command line. So you can write desktop, and now you are in that desktop. So you can see my files in the desktop. If I write, for example, like this, I get all the files that's inside my desktop. Okay. Now in my desktop, I already created a folder here. I call it GYSO course and so on. So I can access this folder using its name. So now where am I? This directory means that I'm already inside this folder, okay? So I'm already here, okay. So what's the use of this? Okay, keep explaining about the directory and so on. So how are we going to use this? Now when we start a project, a Python project, C++ project, and so on, you have to create what we call a workspace or a work environment. So here we can define the workspace by a folder. So this will be our workspace. For example, for this course, we'll be using this as a workspace. So our code, examples of code will be here. So this folder will create our code here, and to run our code, we have to know how to access this directory. Okay, so we'll be running our code using the command line. Okay, so this is a standard way of running a Python code. So now let's start by creating Python code. Okay, there are many ways to create a Python code. Let's start by the easiest one. For example, I can use what we call it an editor, more editor, like for example, like the Notepad. Let's call this one test. Okay. So, however, if you can check this one, the extension is txt, but it will not be a Python code. So how to change it? Let's say hello. Okay. And I have to go here, save as, all files, then I have to write the extension of Python, which is .py, save. Now I have my file and so on. Okay, now if I want to run this one, you can see, I can check my dictionary, it's already here. If I run the code here, for example, for you, if I try to run the code using the Python, it doesn't run, okay? However, the code is correct. Why? Because it runs, but it's very fast. That's why we are using the command line here. Okay, I can run my code using this way. Python, okay, then the name of my file. It's important to also include the extension. So if I write Python, run the code and enter, yeah, my code is running. I printed hello world, okay? But it's tedious, to just or start the notepad and so on. That's why we are using Visual Studio Code. There are two ways to start the Visual Studio Code. You can go here, start the Visual Studio Code directly. Okay. However, if you start the Visual Studio Code this way, by clicking there, it will not start in your folder. Now, it's not in your folder, it's somewhere else. Okay. Now, if you want to go to your folder, you have to go here, open a folder, and go to your folder. Where's my folder? It's already in the desktop. Then I go to this one, is my folder, select folder, and now my code is, or my IDE is already starting, or is already running inside the folder. So I can see this. I can see my first, piece of first code or code file. Okay. Now you can see that when I started in the IDE, I can see the colors. It's already colored. I can differentiate between a string. I can also, if I try, for example, to write a print, it will auto-complete for me and so on. Okay, you can see this. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Now, you can see the auto-completion. You can write your code and so on. This is the Visual Studio Code. Now, imagine that I already sorry, I don't have. I already opened my Visual Studio Code inside the. Let's delete this one. I already started my Visual Studio Code inside my folder. How to create a code? Okay, how to create a code file. Okay, so we can just go here. You can new file, create a new file. Because we are creating a Python file, you can name it any name and just .py. Okay. However, make sure that you don't have space. Okay. If you want to have a space, use underscore and so on. Okay. Just for example, one. Okay. This one, now I already have my Python file. Okay. Now I can write my code here. For example, hello world. Okay. In the command, sorry, in the VS Code, you can start your program if you already installed the Python extension. This one. If you go to here to extensions, you can check for your Python extension. If it's already installed, you can just run your code. Right click, go here to run Python file in terminal. Okay, it will open a small terminal here down below. You can see hello world. It's already here. Okay. Also, if you have the latest version, also you can see this run file in terminal. You can also run using the play button here. Okay, this is for creating a Python file using Visual Studio Code. Okay, now we'll start writing our first code. We already know about the data types and so on. Now let's try and test about the data types and test them and so on. So let's start by defining variables. So in a programming language, if you want to do some operations, first you have to define a variable and assign a number to it. In Python, you can define a variable like x and assign, for example, 10 to it and say y equals to and so on. Okay, now I have x and y. Now I can show the results like this, print y. Okay. I can also run my code, as I told you, Python here. You can run it from here. The other way is also you can, if you can run it also from Python. Write your file name. So my file name is test /1 and run. Okay, it's okay. So if you manage to run your file or Python file this way, so it means that your Python interpreter and Visual Studio Code are installed correctly. Okay. Now this is for using or writing your code using Visual Studio Code. Okay, now already, for example, now this way we define two integers. This is an integer. This is an integer. This print, to call it print function, help us to print the result to the command line like this way. Okay. Okay. Now let's define the other type, that type we mentioned, which is float. So let's say now I have x, for example, y, for example, let's say we have z. So 10 plus, sorry, 10.5. Okay. Okay. This is a float. So I can, now you see that in the interpreter, we have to run line by line. And, you know, if you change, if you miss or write something, for example, like x, or keep writing and I made an error, I have to write the whole line again, and it will not be available there, for example, if I close and so on. This way, this is why we are using an IDE or an editor to write our code. So I can, now the code is already there. I can run the code. Okay. I can change the code a bit, for example, change here and run the code again and so on. Okay. Now let's create, for example, new list. This is a list. Let's say 3, 4, 1. Okay, this is a list. Let's create, for example, new list. Okay, let's create a table. It's a new table altogether. Okay, this is a table. Okay. Now I can also dictionary. Well, this one just to refresh your memory about data types. Okay, new list, new table, new dict, and so on. New set, for example. Okay, let's say one. Okay, now I can just print them one by one and so on. Okay, if I run my code here, run file. Okay, you can see this is the integer, this is an integer, this is a list, this is a table. So I have a dictionary here. Okay. Okay, this is a dictionary and so on. This is for using Visual Studio Code in Python and so on. I hope you were able to run your Visual Studio Code correctly. If you have any problems running, can you mention it in the chat? If you have any problem running your Visual Studio Code with Python or running Python, I think you can mention it in the chat before we go further. Oh, someone has asked, I'm curious why the D is capitalized in new dict. Thanks. Huh? Okay, this is just, you know, a way to write a variable. It doesn't mean anything for now. Okay. So you can write it this way and so on. This one is what we call it, coding style. Okay. So for Python, the correct coding style is to use this one, okay, not to capitalize. But because I'm just explaining the basics, I just capitalize. For this one, a coding style for example, JavaScript. So the way I capitalize the second letter and so on for a new word is just the coding style for the language, okay? It's already a common way in the community, okay? So for Python, you do it this way, the coding style, okay? But for the JavaScript, for example, you do it this way, okay? That doesn't mean anything, okay? Someone says how to run the Python in Visual Studio. Oh, actually, for Visual Studio, you know, it's not easy as in the Visual Studio Code. Visual Studio, you have to install, you know, the what you call it, the Python interpreter, package inside the Visual Studio itself. Okay, I think you can check the documentation inside their website. I cannot explain it here because, sorry, I can't explain it here because I don't have the Visual Studio Code. It's a bit heavy. Okay. Actually, this one is the Visual. This is the Visual Studio Code. We are running now. Visual Studio Code. This is the Visual Studio Code. Now I'm running the Visual Studio Code. This is the Python code. I'm running the Visual Studio Code. Okay. This is a code running the Visual Studio Code. Okay. Someone says, can you add x plus one? Yeah. Just you can just, for example, let's say if you want to show the results, you can say x plus y. Okay, later, actually for the operations, we will discuss the operations later. But now I want to make sure everyone is have the the Python interpreter and Visual Studio Code running correctly, so we don't face any problems later in the course. Okay, I think now everyone is okay. I think now we can proceed further with the course if everyone is okay. Yeah, someone here asked, after each line of code added, we need to save the file before rerunning in the terminal. Actually, yeah, because now, for example, if let's say let's delete this one and I run the code again in the terminal this way, it will run the previous because it didn't save. You can in Visual Studio Code, you can see this dot. This one means the file haven't been saved. Okay, so if I save now and try to run it, it will run. Okay. However, if you are running using run Python file in terminal, it will auto save. Okay. This one, it will auto save, and this one also. So for example, let's say this one. You can know that you can know that you already saved or not if you have this dot. If you have this dot, means that the file is not saved yet. So you have to save it. And you can save the file if you run the file using the play button. If you have the play button there, or run Python file in terminal, it will save directly. Okay. However, if you are, for example, if you just write some code here, for example, print here, okay. If I do this and see, I didn't save, but I didn't run the code here. For example, I ran it using the command line here. It's not here. Why? Because I didn't save. I have to save first. So as a beginner, it's easier for you to just run Python file in terminal. But I had to explain the command line for you and so on, just the basic. You don't need to care much about it, but so you have basic understanding of the command line, because I teach some students before, and they was facing some problems using the command line when they want to run the code. So it depends. But if you are using the Visual Studio Code and you installed it correctly, you can just go run Python file in terminal, or just use the play button here. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. We can proceed with the course then. Okay. Okay. Let's clear this one. Now, one of the the basics that you, or the things that you need to keep in mind, that Python or other programming languages have something we call reserved words. What do we mean by reserved words? Reserved words means words, or sorry, it means words that we cannot use as variable names. Okay, because Python is already using them for some for its own functions. Okay, because let's say now let's go here, for example, run Python, and I try to, for example, to write a variable and call it my variable and, let's say, and two. It will give you invalid syntax. So what does it mean? Your grammar, your syntax is wrong. Why? Because and is a reserved word. So reserved word. And you cannot use reserved words as a variable. So we cannot use and as a variable. True also, for example, let's try true. Okay. Also, you cannot use it. But true like this, you can use it. Why? Because true with capitalized T is a reserved word for Python. But true with small t is not a reserved word. But in other languages, it's a reserved word for that language, and so on. So each language has its own reserved words. Okay. So for Python, we have these reserved words. So you have to keep in mind, we have false, none, true, and, as, assert, break, class, if, till, and so on. Okay. These are the reserved words you have to keep in mind. You cannot use them as variables. You cannot use them as function names. You cannot use them as class names, and so on and so forth. Okay. This works for the reserved words. Okay. Later I will send you the course materials. Okay. And also you can check on the internet. If you go to the Python website, you can check for the reserved words for Python and so on. Okay. Now we'll discuss the rules for using or writing or defining a variable. Okay. So the variable rules, we have three rules we have to take care, or we have to focus on. First, a variable name can start either with a letter or an underscore. What does that mean? So if I come here, I cannot use this. For example, let's say start, whatever, 7. It will give me a syntax error. Okay, this syntax is wrong. Okay, you cannot do this. Okay, cannot define a variable using, for example, using a sample. You cannot do this, for example, also. Okay, this is Not correct. The only way to start a variable is either using a letter, any letter, or using an underscore. Okay. Okay. This is what does the first rule mean. You start with an underscore or a letter. Other other than that, other than this, you cannot. Okay. The second rule: a variable name can consist of letters, numbers, and underscores. What does it mean? I can do this. This is correct. Okay, I can do this. Okay, I can I can do this. For example, new blah 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 so on. Okay, there is also correct way to do it. What else? Let's say. See what? Cannot assign operator. Why? Because this one is an operator. You cannot use it. Okay. Okay. Also this one. So what can we use between letters or in the variable name? You can use an underscore. You can use numbers and also letters. However, we cannot use a space. None correct. Okay. We cannot use what do you call it? Symbols like this one, and so on. You cannot use them. It will show you an error. Okay. Because each one of them has a meaning for Python, so you cannot use them. Okay. The third rule, or what you can say is not a rule, is a note, is that variable names are case sensitive. What does it mean? Case sensitive means that, let's go to we have a table here. So it means that book, okay, it's not the same as book. So if I check book here exam here, and if I check this book, this one and this one is different. Because what? This one is capital, this one is small. So this one is totally different. Because A and A is different. Okay. This is what does it mean? Case sensitive. Okay, this one. So what else? This one and this one is totally different. So you can just any change in a case here, it means a new variable. You cannot for example, let's define this one. For example, if I define P, okay, equals 1. If I try to call B in a small case, it will not, because it's not defined. I don't have a variable name B yet. I haven't defined it. If I define it, yeah, I can use it later. Okay, that's all. This is a table. This table, concludes the whole thing. Okay, so writing a variable, this one is correct, but also this one is correct. However, if you use this way, not correct. Okay. Someone say, can you say book equals 1 and book equals 1? It's okay, because if I say book equal 1 and book equal 1, this one are totally different variables. Okay. Yeah, I know this one is a different variable. Sorry, this one is a different variable, and this one is a different variable. So it's okay. You can say whatever. You can assign anything, as long as the variable name is correct. You can assign the same numbers. You can assign whatever you want. Okay. So there's no problem. Okay. This one just how this table concludes the rules of using variables. Okay. Okay. Now we'll go to the operations, because now in Python we are dealing with numbers, we are dealing with strings, we are dealing with different data types, and with the main thing we are dealing with is numbers, because after all, computers or electronic device deals with digital values, which is numbers here. Okay. So the operations we have addition, we already know the addition, 1 plus 1 and so on. We have subtraction, we have multiplication, division, power, which is to the power of 2 and so on. We have remainder. Okay. The remainder, some of you who already know about programming, other programming languages will understand it. In C++, we call it module. Okay. So operations, we can do, for example, let's start here over again. So you can see that while I'm explaining, I'm using the Python interpreter, which is also we call an interactive shell. Okay, so because it's easier to write the code and see the result. Okay, using the interactive shell. However, if you are writing a long code, we are going to use the Visual Studio Code here to write the code and run it. Okay, it's the same thing, but however, this one I can keep my code. This one, the moment I close, everything is lost. Okay. I hope now you are following with me. Let's start by doing some simple operations. This one, easy one, 2 plus 1, 2 minus 1, and so on. Okay, this is simple operations. You can also do the operations like this. Y, so x plus y. Okay, we have also x multiplied by y, 4. We have the division, also same. Okay, we have the power, so we can say 2 to the power of 2 means 4. Okay, and we have the remainder. So a remainder, for example, if 5 multiplied by 2, we have 2.5. This is the division, but 5 using the remainder. So the remainder of, what does the remainder mean? The remainder of dividing 5 by 2, give me the remainder. That's what does this operation do. So 5, it will be 2 and 2, and we have a remainder of 1. That's what does it do. Okay, so the remainder of the, what you call it, the division operation. Okay, this is the one I already explained. Okay, this is all for the operations for Python. Does anyone has any question? Okay, so let's try to continue with that. So in Python, when you are talking about operations, for example, if I say, let's define a variable, call it 2. No, reminder here doesn't mean the ratio. The remainder gives you the remainder of the division operation. Okay, so when you divide two numbers, there will be a remainder. For example, if we divide 4 divided to 2, there's no remainder. So 4 divided by 2, so 2 and 2. That's all. However, if I divide 5, okay, by 2, so we'll have 2 and 2, and we still have 1. This is the remainder. Okay, it's in mathematics. Yeah, the left of the division of the division, or what we have left from the division. That's this is for the remainder. Okay, let's focus to the so in Python, let's define variable here too, and define this variable as also, for example, y, let's call c. Okay, so if I do this in Python, the order of the operation is from the left to the right. Okay, so by x plus y minus 2, okay? So, sorry, yeah, x plus y plus minus 2, okay. Okay, so x plus y is normal mathematic, and then you minus from the result is minus the, what you call it, so what's happening here is that what Python does, it will add these two, then it will minus the two from them. Okay, so it's like this: x plus y, then minus 2. Okay, so from the left to the right. Okay, yeah, from the left to the right. Okay, so sometimes during programming, to make sure that we are, we are following what our program will do. For the operations, we can do like this. For example, x plus y, because we already know the variety of operations is the parentheses, then we go for after the parentheses. Okay, so the order of the operations will start with the parentheses, simple mathematics, then we go to the outer, the parentheses. So this one, like this one, so plus y equal to and so on. So it will do Python will start do this operation and this operation, then it will add them. Okay, but if you do this, x multiplied by y by 2, this is what happens here is that, okay, so what happens is Python, because it's after all it's mathematics, so it will Python will do this operation, then it will add it to the x. So it's like x is already, for example, 2, so y multiplied by 2, 6 plus 2, and so on. Okay, okay, this is just as how Python deals with mathematical operations. So I think that's all for the mathematical equations. Any question? Okay. Someone is asking, once typed the equation wrongly, cannot be deleted. Actually, if you are using the interpreter like this, okay, you can just redo rewrite it. That's all. However, if you are using the Python editor, you can just edit it anytime you want, because you can just edit the equation and rewrite it and so on. That's all. So it doesn't mean it cannot be deleted. So we can just do like we can just do some operations here. Let's define x equals 3, y equals, for example, 2. So I can define new variable. Let's call it, for example, result. Okay, so I can x plus y. Okay, is an equation. I can say x plus y plus 2 multiplied by y, and so on. So this, for example, this is an equation, okay? So print results. This is my code. So I run the code, I get the results here. Okay. If I want to change the equation, I can just change the code. It doesn't mean it cannot be deleted, because this is just a simple operation. The value will be stored inside the variable will be called, and so on and so on. Okay. Any other question? Yeah, actually for exercise, yeah, I will give you a simple exercise, because now we just covered the basics. It will be just a simple exercise to do with the operations and so on. Okay. Any other question? Yeah, for the slides, I will be sharing it with you. Someone is asking, can we use integer plus flat? Yes. So if you go here, let's say x equals 10.5, sorry, 10.5, and y equals, for example, 3. So you can use it x plus y, and the result will be a flat. Okay, a float, sorry. Yeah, the recording I will give it to the course operator to share it with you. Okay. Now we already understand. I think we'll discuss more about. We already understand the operations with numbers and so on. Now we'll discuss more. We'll discuss more about the operations with the strings. Okay. So imagine that I have this string. Hello. This is another, and this is another string. Let's say 4. Okay. These two different strings. Okay. This is string. This is a string. So one of the Python features or operations we can do this string is something called concatenate. What does it mean? Put together. We have one string, this is X, and this is another string, Y. You can just use the addition symbol to do that concatenation process. So we add them together. So I have two strings put together. Okay. Also, I can do this. Let's say X space Y and so on. Okay, this is one of the operations we can do to a string. Other operation, for example, let's say I can access only one letter of a string, okay? And there are other operations we'll be discussing later, like changing from capital to small, small to capital, and so on. Okay. I think this is all for today. If you have any questions, I'll be answering them. We still have, I think, 9 minutes. That's all for today's session. By the way, as for the exercise, I'll share a small exercise with you inside the group, so you can practice. It will not be that difficult exercise because we only just covered the basics, so it will be just simple mathematical operations and so on. That's all. I think that's all. If you have anything to say or to ask, I'm here. Let's tell how to run syntax in Visual Studio. I don't understand you. When you say syntax here, what do we mean by syntax is the way the language is structured. So when I say y equals 2, this is the syntax of the language. So this is a variable, this is the assignment of variable. Okay? When we say, so if I write something like x equal 3, and I try to run the code, okay, it will show you invalid syntax. Why? Python doesn't have this kind of syntax. This is the syntax. Syntax is the rules of using the language, okay? That's all for a syntax. So syntax is not something we run. Syntax is the the rules of the language itself. You learn the syntax of the language, so and each language has different syntax. For example, let's say this is Python. This is Python syntax. Okay, so in Python, in Python I can let's say in Python I can print the result using print. Okay, however in C I don't use print. I just use C out, and I pass the variable and so on. Okay, so this is Python syntax. This is C++ syntax. Okay, and for example, in JavaScript, I say console, for example, log. Okay, result. So this is Python syntax. This is C++ syntax, and this is JavaScript syntax, and so on. So that what do we mean by syntax? So these three instructions do the same thing, mostly the same thing. Okay. However, the way that it's written is different from language to a language. That's what do we mean by a syntax. Any other question? Okay, I'll think we still have 4 minutes. If you have any question, you can ask. How to convert text file to Python file? Actually, it's not. You can convert a text file to Python file. The way I showed you now, if I'm using a text editor here, sorry. I mean this one. If I've created a text file like this one. Just this one, I showed you how we can use the other kind of editor. So this is not important. So this is blah 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 and so on. So this one, we just save the file as I save the file as a Python file. Okay. So it's not that important. So it's not related to the course that much. This one is just to show you the difference between using an editor or using the IDE or the integrated development environment. How is the difficulty of using both. Okay, that's all. So you still have 2 minutes if you have anything to ask. Someone says that when you divide 5 by 2, he gets 2. Actually, the problem is that if you use you have to make sure that your data type or what you can say, the variable is and the data type is float. Okay, what do I mean is that if let's say, for example, 5 and say this one is 2. So if we do the operations 5 minus 2, it will be it will be 2.5. But however, if you just make this single mistake, which is 5 plus 2, then you are using another kind of a variable or operation, which is 5 using the divide symbol twice means you are telling Python to give you the what you call it, sorry, to give you the integer only and ignore the any other decimal numbers. That's what this one do. So if you do the operation normally like this, it should give you 2.5. Okay, unless you convert it, use some kind of conversion, you convert it to an integer like this, it will give you 2. Okay, this one we'll discuss later using the conversion and so on. And I think that's all. Thank you all for being in this course. In this session, next session will be according to the dates published in the group. Thank you all and goodbye. Yeah, for this, I will share the slides in the group.